Sorry. Let me get this stuff going here. There's so many things you gotta push, and then we gotta start.
Hats off to you for doing this all day long.
Live Facebook posts here. Let me get it started before we get into our content, because we want to make sure everybody gets this here. So give me 1 second. Let's see here.
Can you hear me okay there?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, let me get this launched here. All right. So we're going live there. All right, Scott, you started in residential real estate sales, closing $2.2 million in your first 12 months. That's pretty impressive. But then you realized that being a realtor was not for you, and moved into the investment space and started flipping and over 150 residential transactions and building a portfolio of rental properties worth over $20 million to date. You are the host of the Invest This podcast. So, Scott, thanks for being with us. And I'm going to turn it over to you. Are you doing a PowerPoint presentation or slide presentation?
Yep, I'm going to do one. So I'll bring that up as soon as you hand it over.
Okay, I'll go ahead and just hit the share button when you're ready to do that, and I'll let you have it.
Okay. Let's do this. All right. Everything good to go?
You're good to go.
Okay. All right. Well, glad to be here. Absolutely. It's been I've only been able to be on here for part of the presentations today. So the ones I have seen have been phenomenal, and really my hats off to the organizers to get this all put together. I know that it could be super, super, super challenging to do that. And, it's been pretty impressive. So I'll go ahead and dive right in. First and foremost, I think it's important to know a little bit more about me. I appreciate the introduction. Started off in residential real estate as a realtor with Keller Williams, which I think was probably the best option for me at the time to really learn the business. But doing $2.2 million in sales my first year sounds great, but I got to be honest with you, it's really not. Anybody who's been a broker or been a realtor knows that $2.2 million in volume is really nothing. And one of the major things that turned me off was that at the time, Keller Williams really didn't. They thought it was a big deal. They were all hooting and hollering because, I had done 2.2 million in sales, and they were thinking that was a lot. And here I was looking at my bank account like, where's all the money? What's going on? So that really was the very beginning for me. And I think that it's also important for me to tell you the backstory before that for all the listeners out there that are listening to this, because I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona. I've been an entrepreneur my entire life, started my first car detailing company when I was a junior in high school, and ended up becoming good friends and having my first mentor be the president of the third largest third-party logistics company in the nation at the time. And what that did for me was allowed me to go to, he asked me to come intern with him when I was going to college after high school. During the summertime, and I would learn every different piece of the business. And then when I graduated high school or graduated college, rather, I would be able to go anywhere in the country, and they would start a position for me. So, of course, that is a phenomenal opportunity for a college grad that was graduating in 2011, which is when I graduated from college. And everybody knows that the market was not great at that time, so it was hard enough to find a job, let alone have an opportunity like that. So, anyways, I took that opportunity. Ended up coming to Phoenix, Arizona, and worked for another company for this Jacobson Companies for about a year. And I was in the staffing development side of the logistics process. So anybody out there that doesn't understand logistics, it is basically supply chain management end to end. So you need staffing to staff your warehouses and staff your trucks and all the above. And so I was in charge of going out and recruiting companies to allow us to provide staffing. So did that for about a year, and it was absolutely horrible, mainly because I'm an entrepreneur and I want to control. And because I had a good close relationship with the president of this company, and by the way, it was a 7,500 person company at the time. Anytime I had a problem, I just called him. And in the corporate world, that doesn't work. So was and I'm segueing into how I got into real estate. So I was actually dating a girl at the time who was in property management, and she said, I was complaining about the job and everything. She said, well, why don't you just go and get your real estate license, and you could sell real estate. It's sales. You'd probably be good at it. So I followed her advice. And that's exactly what I did. I went to school at nighttime, got my real estate license, and dove right in with 2 feet. I actually tried to do both, work a corporate job and start a real estate career at the same time. And as we all know, or anybody that is an entrepreneur knows that, in order to really be successful, you got to dive in with both feet. You have to burn the boats, so to speak. And so I did that after about 3 months of trying doing it, doing both. I decided that real estate was the way to go, and cashed in the small 401k that I had and put all my nuts into that basket and dove in, with 2 feet. So then it, started off with Keller Williams and found out that being a realtor wasn't for me. But I also found out that you could join things like RIAs, which I did here in Phoenix, and I found other ways that I could make money in real estate. And it's in the investment world. Matter of fact, a lot of the people that are watching this and listening to this, whoever, probably know a guy named Dave Lindahl. And Dave Lindahl actually came and spoke at the Phoenix RIA and just resonated with me. He's an apartment syndicator, apartment investor, and his story just made sense to me. And so what I did was I actually borrowed $11,000 from my mom to hire him to teach me how to syndicate apartment buildings. And now, mind you, I was only 24 years old, 23 years old at this time. So, it was to syndicate an apartment building was a massive task. So anyway, so I went in and I started coaching with Dave and learning how to underwrite deals and learning how to look at deals. And I came across one of Dave's students. Dave had an event here in Phoenix shortly, a couple of months after I had started working with him, where he had one of his students who had gone through the program and saw some success, who also happened to live here in Phoenix, get up on stage and kind of give a testimonial. And when he did that, I realized that this is a guy I had to meet. So I called Dave Lindahl's office and I said, hey, Jeannie, if anybody knows, is his right-hand gal. Like, hey, Jeannie, I need this individual's phone number. I'm gonna call him. And so ended up calling him for like a month before he actually answered the phone. And finally, when he did, he said, well, what can I do for you? You've been blowing my phone up. What can I do? I said, listen, I just need 10 minutes of your time. Let me buy a cup of coffee and we'll go from there. So we actually went to coffee and ended up hanging out with 2.5 hours. And he said, apartments are great. And this was back in 2013. And he said, apartments are great, but you can only do, a few deals a year, 3-4 deals, 5 deals, if you're lucky, whatever. And he said, I have this other idea with wholesaling single family houses. And here I had been a realtor. I had an idea of what was going on in the real estate space, single family wise. And so I was intrigued. I said, okay, tell me more. He said, I know some individuals up in Salt Lake City, Utah that are doing this and they're making like 90 grand a year. And here I'm thinking, this is phenomenal. I'm all in. So what I did is I went up to Salt Lake City and I job shadowed these guys for 3 or 4 days. And I figured out what they were doing. And being in Phoenix, I said, okay, well, why don't we just come down to Phoenix, do exactly what they're doing? We should have the same result, right? I mean, this is real estate. This is not rocket science. So we did exactly that. This other individual I was working with paid for all the marketing to get the marketing out there. And I did all the negotiating, putting things under contract, and ultimately selling to other investors on a wholesale basis. Or we took down a few to fix and flip. But regardless, I understood the business model. Now, after about 6 months, I realized he was making all the money and I was doing all of the work, which is typical, I think, for when somebody is working with somebody that might be a little bit more experienced. So at the 6-month mark, I decided that this wasn't going to be it wasn't going to be what I was going to do with him anymore. I was now going to go start my own company. And so that's exactly what I did. So let's just keep moving on here. I also have to tell you that my company is HBSB Holdings. That's how it first started. As you can tell, when I started the company, it was a commercial acquisitions company. And the reason for that is because I was out there trying to acquire real or apartment buildings, not necessarily single family houses, but the logo stuck and everything worked out. And so I kept that around. I'm also the host of the Invest This podcast. We're going to get into that a little bit later in the call, but that is my company. So I already told you a little bit of the backstory now on why or how I got into wholesaling and why I did that. Now, the other thing was that the market at this point was really turning around. So we were starting to see a pretty good increase in home prices. There's still a lot of distressed houses out there, and there's still a lot of opportunity. Not saying that there's not all the time, but there's a lot of opportunity at this time to find off-market discounted properties. And so I knew that this was a market or a marketing type or a type of real estate that really wasn't going to go away. When I looked at what wholesaling was, it's buying distressed assets, you're selling them to other investors to go in and do the work. And what that does for you is it actually, three people are winning there, okay? The seller of a property is winning because they're getting out of a distressed situation and being able to sell their property for cash, and getting out from the property, whatever situation they're in, without having any problems. I'm coming in there solving a problem for them. The investor that I sell it to, they're also solving a problem because they're not going to find those off-market discounted deals without me. And I'm winning, of course, because I'm in the middle. I have no risk involved, and I'm making a spread in the middle. Basically, I'm making a spread. And so I saw this and I was like, man, this is just a phenomenal business model. Coming from the retail world, at first I didn't believe it. I didn't realize that this was even a legal thing to do until I understood more about what it is. And maybe it's better that I go ahead and I explain what wholesaling is for some people out there that might not understand exactly what it is. So basically what wholesaling is it's kind of like selling paper. I'm putting a contract on a property to buy a property from somebody, and then I turn around and I sell that contract to another investor. So as an example, somebody comes in or a seller calls me and they say, hey, I need to sell my house tomorrow. I go out on the property, realize the house, I'm willing to give them $100,000. Maybe it's worth $200,000 if it's fixed up, but I'm willing to give them $100 to get out of their house today or tomorrow. So I sign a contract with that seller, and that seller and I are now in contract. Well, what happens for me is that now I have equitable title in that property, meaning that I can do whatever I want with that contract. I can sell that contract. I can close on that contract. I have equitable title to that property. So now all of a sudden I have this contract for $100,000, and I'm going to go to another investor out there and say, hey, Mr. Other Investor, would you be interested in this property? I'll sell it to you for $110,000. He says, great. That's an awesome deal. Yes, I'd be interested. So I say, okay, phenomenal. Now, I could either do one of two things. I can double close it or assign my contract to this other investor. Now, what happens there is that the other investor who I'm going to sell it to for $110,000 on the day of closing is going to bring $110,000 to the closing table. I'm going to give $100,000 to the seller, as I said I would. I'm going to put $10,000 in my pocket, and the end buyer's investor is going to walk away, and everybody's happy. It's a win-win-win all the way across the board. So for those of you out there that maybe don't understand or know what wholesaling is all about, that in a nutshell is what it is. And there's a lot of opportunity out there. Here in Phoenix, I want to say there 3 to 4% of the population of people out there are willing to sell to a wholesaler or willing to sell to an investor for cash. So in a major metropolitan area, that's a lot of people, and it's a good business model. So anyways, we'll keep on moving. I kind of already talked to you about how I got started and why I got started. But I think that the other important part about how I got started with wholesaling houses is that how do I fund it? Because in order to find these off-market deals, in order to find wholesale transactions, they're not on the MLS most of the time. They're not going to be they're not going to be available to the general public, because if they were, then you wouldn't be able to get them for a discounted price. Too many people would see it, too many eyes would be on it, and at that point, the price would be elevated. So, in order to find these deals, you have to market for them. Well, what I understood at this time, and actually maybe I should back up. When I first started my company, HBSB Holdings, I realized that I didn't know exactly what I was doing, and I wanted some help. So I'm a very firm believer in coaching and organizations that help you, that have already been there, done that, and can show you how to do it. Matter of fact, there's some speakers that are in here that are out there that have been on at this event. Trevor McGregor is one of them. Joe Frallis is another one of them that are in my circle and have added tremendous value to what I've been able to do. But at the time when I started the company, I knew that I also needed to have another wholesale type coach that knew what they were doing to better guide me. So I signed up with some of you might know who he is out there, Kent Clothier, with Real Estate Worldwide. And since then, him and I have become good friends, and he's definitely a good mentor of mine. But I knew that with his guidance, I would be successful. And so, so then when I realized that this was kind of a strategy that wasn't going to go away, and I was surrounded by the right people, now all of a sudden it was just press and go. So I found out that, this is the way to do it. I had the marketing, and I guess I should maybe talk about how I paid for the marketing, because that's another important piece of what I did. I figured out that credit cards, which are, somewhat sketchy, but credit cards are actually a very, very useful tool. And the reason they're a useful tool is because they allow you to use money for free if you know how to use it right. And so what I did was I was able to, in order to get a marketing budget for myself that I knew I could, that I could make money at it. I knew how the process worked. I had already done some transactions with the guy I was working with before, so I knew it wasn't like it was a new concept. I knew how it was going to work. I just needed marketing funds to fund it. So I figured out that if I applied for 10 credit cards at one time, and they were all approved because at the time I had good credit, they were all approved, I knew that I could instantly call those credit card companies and ask for a credit line increase. Well, what I also knew is that when they send you credit cards in the mail, typically they're going to send you a convenience check that goes along with that credit card. And what you can do with that convenience check is actually write your company a check for a certain percentage of the allowable credit limit that you have on that credit card. So what I did is I wrote myself a check for 90% of the allowable credit that I had on each credit card, and I deposited it into my business checking account. Now, this is a little bit risky if you don't know how to make money out of it, but because I knew how to make money out of it, I wasn't worried about paying it back. The reason why is because I knew that I had 12 to 18 months of 0% interest where I could use this money for free. So basically, I put all my chips, I was all in, and I realized that I was going to figure this out, and this is going to be my way to do it. So anyways, I ended up putting $90,000 into my business checking account, and I used those funds then to drop marketing. I did direct mail marketing, and I targeted high equity and free and clear owners of properties, and it worked. And it worked very, very well. Matter of fact, I'd already had experience with talking to sellers from working with the other individual that I worked with for a while. I've always been kind of a people person and a sales type guy, so it worked. And that has been my strategy really for the last few years on how to make money. And like I said earlier in the call, it's one of those things where you're helping 3 different people in one transaction and everybody wins. So, and not to mention, you might be wondering, well, where's the risk? There's really not a whole lot of risk. Now, some of you might think, well, what happens if you can't sell the contract? What happens if, you can't sell the contract? And what happens then is you either get out of the deal, you're able to cancel the contract, or you can renegotiate with the seller to get a lower price so that, you could sell it. And ultimately, you do have to have an understanding of real estate values in order to be able to make an appropriate offer. Because actually, one of the coaches and mentors I had when I was starting off, he said, if it's not a little bit uncomfortable when you make an offer, you're probably offering too much. So So anyway, so that was really kind of how I got started with wholesaling. And it really took off very quickly. I was able to kind of quadruple the amount of business from 6 transactions to 24 transactions in 1 year, basically by just rinse and repeating, making sure that I understood that, even when times got tough, I was always marketing for off-market deals, always marketing for sellers that were in distress, and was rinse and repeating every single time. So here we go. What does a wholesale business do for you? So I kind of told you about how the process works. I told you about my story on how I got started, but what does it really do for you? Well, what a wholesale business does is it puts a lot of cash in your pocket. Okay. These are pretty big, you can make pretty good assignment fees, and you can wholesale these properties for decent chunks of money. And so very quickly you can build up a cash reserve. Now, what does that do for you? Well, now all of a sudden you have money to invest in other deals. You have money to go syndicate an apartment building with. You have money to buy other single family houses to put in a portfolio. Over the last couple of years, what I've been able to do is buy several single family houses, a triplex. I got into a syndication deal, was able to do that. Was able to, it basically just puts a bunch of cash into your pocket. Now, what else this does is when you're wholesaling these houses, you're selling them to other investors that are going to ultimately buy them from you and go in and fix them up. Well, these other investors also are spending their money, and they're investors, so they have other money to spend. So now all of a sudden I have more people in my circle that I've sold properties to, or that are raising their hand saying they want to buy off market deals, that these people I can approach and ask if they'd like to get into a syndication deal, ask if they'd be interested in partnering up or JVing with me on an apartment deal, or on a self-storage deal, or a commercial building. This allows me to have more conversations with more people, because I know that they raised their hand at one time and said, hey, I want to buy your single family house. But you know what else they did is they raised their hand and said, hey, I'm an investor, I have money. So when it goes into raising money, which I think is one of those things out there that people, including myself, struggle with, this is a reason for me to be able to have that conversation with them. So keep on moving here. Now we talk about how to transition into multifamily, which is kind of what all this call is about: starting a wholesale business and then making the transition into multifamily. Now, right now I'm going through this transition. Last year, 2018, I was happy to get into a syndication deal, 120 units, as a limited partner. And what that did for me was it allowed me to see what was going on, or how the deals worked, how the communication structure works between a general partner and a limited partner, how the reports come to me every single month, and what they look like and what to review. What it did for me was allowed me to have these conversations, because now I've built up some capital, I built up some excess cash wholesaling houses, and now I have a place where I can put it. I can invest it into a multifamily deal to get phenomenal write-offs and tax incentives, as well to have good cash flow and ultimately a good net worth, or building wealth for the family. So another thing I think that it does when you're wholesaling houses is you're looking at a ton of deals. I mean, I look at, hundreds probably a week. I mean, a ton of deals. And so what you get comfortable with is the underwriting process. Now, I know that in multifamily deals or other types of commercial type properties, the underwriting process is much different. And so it takes a little bit longer, but you're understanding how to underwrite, you're understanding what to look for, and you're understanding what a deal maybe looks like. And so what that's helped me do is now when I can look at multifamily investments and compare them to a single family investment and just multiply them. If we're dealing with 100 doors instead of one door, things get a lot easier, really. And so for me, that has really been a great transition. And this year, actually 2019, I've been in communication with some brokers, not only here in Phoenix, but also in Iowa, where I'm from, to syndicate some deals. And so if there are, or actually just to look for deals to end up syndicating. But, I guess as we move forward here, if anybody out there that's listening would have interest in talking with me about it, I'd love to chat with anybody about what deals I am looking at. I guess going back to the deal that I got into last year, and it also helped me to learn what a good multifamily investment might look like. What indications or indicators should I look out for when I'm looking for a good, solid multifamily investment? And the one that I got in had a few things that stuck out to me. And so I want to talk about those for a couple of minutes here. Number one, when we were looking at this deal, this is in an area where there isn't one industry that runs the entire show. So there's not just healthcare that holds the majority of the jobs. There's not just technology or just whatever industry out there that it is that runs all of the jobs in that one area. What I liked about this area that we invested in is that technology and healthcare only make up 15% of the entire workforce, I guess, or all the jobs that are available there. And that's not a very big number. So it's very spread out. Now, it's also in an area that doesn't have big booms and not big busts. When the market fell, when the bottom fell out, like here in Phoenix, it dropped 50% values. I mean, everything fell out here in Phoenix. But in this market, it didn't really move a whole lot. There wasn't a big shift up and there wasn't a big shift down. And so therefore, I found to understand that that's really for a longer term investment. That's a good spot to be because you have less risk. And so I've now taken that information and I've moved it into where I'm looking for deals across the country. Now, I don't believe I said at the beginning of the show, I'm actually a transplant from Iowa, and went to University of Iowa for college and just am from Iowa. I spent the majority of my life there. And so that's one of those markets that is kind of booming right now. There's a lot of industries that are going to Iowa. There's a lot of job opportunities that are there, and it's kind of slow and steady. It's one of those markets where I remember I was actually in college when the bottom fell out, and given I was in college, but it wasn't the massive dip that they saw here in Phoenix or in other large metropolitan areas like Phoenix. It wasn't that big dip where they just lost everything. It was more of a gradual fall down. Properties, of course, weren't going up in value anymore. People did lose their jobs and everything, but it wasn't as dramatic as it was in the coastal states and in areas where big metropolitan areas are. So going into this year and having these conversations, I've been fortunate to been connected with some pretty big brokers in those towns and starting to kind of get plugged in with it. So we're just kind of starting to underwrite deals and understand more about what the market looks like there. And, in the next, in either Q1 or Q2, I will be putting some deals under contract and syndicating them. So super, super excited about that. Now, earlier in the call here, we talked about at the very beginning that I'm the owner of HBSB Holdings, and I'm also the host of the hashtag Invest This podcast. So thanks to a coach, mentor, friend, Joe Fairless out there. He gave me the idea that I need to start some sort of thought leadership platform. Now, when Joe and I started working together a couple of years ago, I thought it was going to be a YouTube channel. Really, I thought that was the way that it was going to be because I like to talk on, I just like to get up and talk. Thought that was going to be the route. Started a YouTube channel and I just wasn't really feeling it. So at the beginning of 2018, actually, or the end of 2017, the beginning of 2018, I decided that a podcast was the way to go. I just really saw that, it would open me up to having conversations with investors, with other people in the space, and providing free content to the listeners out there to keep their business and their life moving forward. So invest this, that's what that means. I want all the listeners to invest the information that you hear on the podcast from all of my guests and all of the content that's out there. I want them to be able to take something from each and every episode and invest it in their life, invest it in their business, and keep them moving forward. Now, what the podcast does for me, matter of fact, that's how I found and got into that 120 unit deal, multifamily deal. It was with a guest I had on the podcast. He had reached out kind of after the fact. He was trying to raise some funds for it and got me plugged in. So therefore, I mean, I've kind of monetized the podcast that way. Not only that, but I've been able to build relationships with people that I otherwise would not have. Matter of fact, there's several speakers that have spoke at this event and are speaking at this event that have been on my podcast, and I've been very fortunate to be able to meet these people. Because if I ever have a question about self-storage, or about buying notes, or about buying portfolios of single-family houses or other multifamily investments, I now have a resource where I can go, and multiple resources where I can go and get my questions answered, get my information answered. And not only that, but when I do put a property under contract, or I do have, I syndicate an apartment deal or commercial deal or whatever it might be, I have several people that I can lean on and say, hey, would you have interest in this? Hey, will you take a second look at this? Hey, will you, validate my opinion and validate exactly what I think is going on here? And, do you want to be part of the deal? Or could you help me raise some money? Or do you want to raise some money? Or the list goes on for the benefits. Not only that, but I also have got a ton of people. I attend a lot of events and things in Phoenix and other places. And I'll just randomly get people that come up to me and say, hey, I love your show. I got this out of it. I got that out of it. And for me, that's super, super rewarding, because at the end of the day, it's all about the impact that I have, that I can have on other people. And the Invest This podcast has allowed me a channel to do that. So, to kind of talk about it more, it's just one of those things where I feel like if you're really serious about getting your content out there, or you're really serious about what you're doing, you should have a thought leadership platform. It has been kind of life-changing for me. And, the other thing is that it's phenomenal. So that might be a sign for me to wrap up here. I don't know. I think we still have plenty of time. But if you want to find me, I'd very much welcome you to go to theinvestthispodcast.com. Please subscribe. You're going to get a ton of content out of it. There's a lot of really good episodes that I've had on with all sorts of different investors and people in the real estate industry. Not just in the real estate industry, but also CPAs. I actually just had an episode with the owner of my gym on the importance of health and business. So there's a lot of different stuff that you're going to be able to get out of it. You can also go to hbsbholdings.com and you can find out more information about me, what's kind of going on, and how we're doing things. And let's see here. And if you want to just go ahead and email me, we can answer any emails or questions or concerns. If you want to get in touch with me about an apartment syndication or any of the above, then send an email to support@hbsbholdings.com, and happy to answer any questions there. Brandon, you there?
I'm here. How you doing?
Man, I gotta be honest, I'm hot.
Yeah. Well, we had the same problem here. The AC runs in the entire building, so they were like, "Oh, we keep it at an average of 72." I was like, "That's too warm."
That's too warm, right?
I like it about 68. So I feel your pain there. So we do have a question that just came in. Wholesaling to multifamily is exactly what Alicia is working on. Recently, a mentor mentioned that I needed to start a platform, and I thought of a podcast. Did you find it hard to focus on a podcast while wholesaling?
The answer to that is no. And the reason why is because I have a phenomenal assistant that does a really good job of organizing all the back end stuff for me on the podcast. She sets the podcast up with the guests and makes sure that they're ready with all the questions that we're going to talk about. And then she goes in and edits and ultimately publishes all the podcast episodes. Now, if I did not have her, absolutely it would be a struggle, a very big struggle. The only time that I really am involved in the podcast is when we're actually having the conversations and the interviews when we're recording. Other than that, I'm fairly hands off.
Yeah, and I know that that's crucial for anybody that's doing a podcast, is having a good editor to put that together. And was this somebody you knew, or did you go onto a platform to find this person to do your editing, or is it information you can share? Or
Well, yeah. So she's my assistant, and actually she lives in Iowa, where I'm from. Very, very small world, but she's married to a guy that I went to high school with. It's super random, but she was a referral from another friend and real estate guy that I know. She used to work for him and was really good, and so they ended up parting ways. But he referred her to me, and now she does all of my social media. She does a lot of stuff for me that I'm just so grateful for.
We have another question that came in on the chat box. It says, what marketing platform do you use to generate leads for Wholesale?
Yeah, so, I'm old school. I'm a direct mail guy. Direct mail has been my tried and true marketing method. Some people out there will say that, it doesn't work. They'll say that, times are changing. They're going with SEO or Google AdWords, pay-per-click, things like that. And I have spent actually a lot of money testing that out. And what I found is that that's not true. My conversion rate is much, much higher on direct mail. And I think that the other thing with direct mail that people don't take into consideration is consistency and time. I've been sending direct mail each and every single month for 4 years. And some people have got 4 years worth of letters from me. And we just keep on mailing. I drop about 40,000 mail pieces a month and continue to do that each and every month.
Okay, awesome. And we have another question. How long did you wholesale before starting your podcast?
It was about 2.5 years or so. 3 years, I guess, if you consider the 6 months I worked with the first individual that I worked with.
Okay. And knowing what you know now, if you could go back in time, would you have wholesaled or flipped first? Which do you think is more lucrative?
So I would say no. I would not flip. And I'll go ahead and type and say why. So when I'm wholesaling houses, I have basically zero risk. I don't have to get a loan. I don't have to borrow hard money. I don't actually end up ever even closing on the property. So I don't have any tax problems. I don't have any, I don't have to put the utilities in my name. There's not, I don't pay the title fees either. And I'm not fixing anything up. So when you fix and flip properties, this is the problem you run into. Let's say that you buy a property, you close on it, and you start working on it. And your budget when you start working on it is $20,000. But you find out that, the plumbing is caved in one area. Now all of a sudden you have to replace the plumbing. Well, there's another $7,500 that you weren't expecting. Oh yeah, and by the way, the windows are crap, or you find out that there's no insulation in the attic, and you got to put insulation up there. There's another $1,500, and before you know it, you're over budget. So then, while you're remodeling this house, something happens in the market, like what's going on right now, where interest rates go up, and all of a sudden, how home prices come down. So when you started the project, you thought you could sell it for, let's say, $250,000. Now all of a sudden interest rates have gone up. Now you can only sell it for $235,000. So not only did your renovation costs go up, maybe the project took longer than expected, but now you can sell it for less money before you even get paid. Do you see all those steps that have to occur before you even get paid? And that's pending that everything goes, and you sell it and make a profit. And wholesaling, I'm putting the property under contract. I'm selling the contract. I get paid. Boom.
Yep. And so we call that when you buy, hoping the market either maintains or rises, is called speculation.
Yep.
And that's why we're here talking about multifamily. There's nothing wrong with flipping or anything else. Everybody has their niche or their investment class, but the reason why we like multifamily so much is because it's an asset that generates its own income. Right. So while single family flip, if you can't sell it or don't have tenants or can't rent it, it's a liability. It's costing you money. Multifamily, it's rare that 130 unit property is going to be, 50% unoccupied. So it's still generating cash, making you money, therefore paying its own bills. So that's why we like it so much. And it can sustain a market turn because valuation in multifamily is based on your NOI. your net operating income. So, while your cap rate is going to fluctuate in a bad economy, that's not going to kill you in the long run if you can raise your NOI, and you can ride out a market jump. So we also call that making money when you buy, not making money when you sell, which is the trouble with flipping. Also, the thing that you have to remember with flipping is you don't get a lot of the tax benefits, right? So like we talked earlier about cost segregation and all that. You're just paying capital gains on that, which you just made and flipping that house, because it's not your primary residence. So that's another benefit that you get from multifamily.
Not sure what happened here.
If you're done with, okay, you hit the stop sharing. Okay, I was going to say, we did get a couple more questions in. If you go back in time, this is the same type of question, same person, but it's worded a little bit differently. If you go back, would you have wholesaled at all for the capital? Or would you have just started raising capital for multifamily from the start?
Hindsight is definitely 2020. And I would say that if I knew how to raise money, I would have just started raising money. Because I would probably be in more multifamily deals now if that was the case than I am. But hindsight's 2020. And I wouldn't be where I'm at now and know everything that I know now had I not gone the path that I've gone down. So I don't believe that plus I was very young, very, very young when I first started. So no, I wouldn't change what I've done. It's got me to where I'm at now.
Exactly. I have the same type of perspective. I mean, life is what your life is, and it's whatever happened before is what got you to this point now. Had things changed, you just simply wouldn't maybe have known about multifamily, if something that would have gone differently. So all those things were steps that led you up to multifamily. So if anything had changed, you might not be where you are now. So absolutely. That's part of growth. Right.
Yeah. And, I think that, one thing so for the longest time, I would work 12-hour days. 12 hours, sometimes 14-hour days every day, because I just was in a race to get to the finish line. But the reality is that there's never a finish line, right? Every investor out there is out there trying to chase the next thing, or trying to get into another deal, or get into multifamily or commercial, whatever it is. But you got to enjoy the journey. And the journey I've had so far has been a ton of learning, a ton of fun. And you know what? When the time is right, I'll syndicate more deals, or I'll get into different deals. And I've just really enjoyed that part of it.
Awesome. And that is the key. You do have to enjoy what you do. Excuse me. It sounds like you do. We have another question from Alicia. Says, any suggestions on what content to focus on if starting a podcast and you're doing wholesaling and multifamily? So what kind of content would you recommend focusing on?
So she, just so I'm clear, she's wholesaling multifamily properties?
Doing wholesaling and multifamily. So it sounds like simultaneous.
Okay, so pretty much the same thing as I am. So what I focus on was interviewing other people, because you end up learning and building relationships with these people simultaneously. When you talk about content, if you want to sell a course, if you want to give free content on how to wholesale, you could break down the different pieces of the wholesale process: the marketing piece, the negotiation piece, putting it under contract, where you find your buyers, how you find your buyers, how you communicate with your buyers, ultimately how you sell it. Do you sign it? Do you double escrow it? The pros and cons of each one. Each one of these things could be a different podcast episode. And really what you could do, and I've thought about doing this myself in the past, is you could record yourself presenting each one of these pieces, package it all together, turn around and sell it.
Right. And with content, like you were saying at the beginning, you mentioned Joe a few times, it's really about, the people you have on the show that provide the content. So it's many different aspects of different things. And it's not all, if you listen to the Best Ever podcast, or Dan's podcast about tough decisions for entrepreneurs, it's not all multifamily people, right? It's different business people. And yet you learn different things from them in their own field. So they don't have to be, multifamily or wholesaling for you to learn something from them. There's business strategies that can be applicable to your specific situation. So just creating valuable content that is not, so much stuff out there is just so light and, there's no meat to it and you don't really learn anything. And they're trying to, a lot of times you'll see this content, they'll try to tease you in to get to buy their coaching program and really giving you really light details. Like that's a waste of everybody's time. Just, tell us what you need to know. Well, share knowledge, right? I'll tell you what I know. You tell me what you know, and we'll all grow from it, right?
Right. It's an abundance out there. I mean, everybody that spoke today and tomorrow or this whole weekend, this whole event, I mean, we're filled with abundance everywhere. In the U.S. especially, it's absurd to think that there is not an abundance of everything we could possibly think of. That goes for money, food, shelter. I mean, we just have it all available to us at all the time. So that's a whole other subject we could probably talk about.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that one. But yeah, so on the content thing, just, the best thing you can do when trying to start something is to start it. Dan has a saying on one of his podcast episodes, version 1 is better than version none. Okay. So sometimes we sit there and we analyze how we're going to get this, trying to make it perfect, where sometimes you just need to launch it. I mean, obviously give it some thought, because you only get a first time to make, or you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. But the point is, don't wait too long. Another saying is, ready, fire, aim. You take so much time, getting ready and aiming, but never, ever fired. We've all met people that, they'll go to conference and will never, ever buy a multifamily property or invest in a multifamily property. And they just always accumulate knowledge. So eventually you have to pull the trigger. Eventually you have to launch the podcast. Eventually you have to get yourself out there. That's the first step. So, and the rest will come pretty easily. You'll figure it out.
Well, and, I kind of take a turn on that too. This is the reality. Each and every one of us don't know if you're going to be here tomorrow. Okay. The reality is, so when I was 16 years old, I had a brain injury and was in a coma for 10 days, spent 32 days in the hospital, had a brain injury. Now I have zero repercussions as of today from it. And I'm super, super grateful for that. But I know that at the time when the accident happened, I was racing motocross at a pretty high level, that's what I did. I raced motocross and I rode all the time. I never would have thought that I would have gotten into a bad accident that really threatened my life, but it did. And it happened like that. And so the same thing could happen for anybody. It's get in your car to drive home tonight, you get hit by another car. All of a sudden you're no longer here anymore. So basically what I'm saying is get out there and do it, because you don't know if you're going to be around to do it if you wait.
Yep. Carpe diem, right?
Right. That's it.
Right. Right. Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for sharing your story and your journey and how that's led you to where you are. And we're excited to see where it goes from here. We know you got good mentorship if you're talking with Joe.
Yeah.
We work with him a lot. So thanks again. And we will see everyone tomorrow in room 2. But everyone right now, if you want to jump over to room 1.
We're over in room 1.
Oh, there's Dan.
How you doing, Scott?
What's up, man?
Everyone, if you want to switch over to room 1, we're going to take live comments from the attendees on
Golden nuggets.
Yep,
golden nuggets from the rest from the day today. So jump over to room 1, and Marco Santorelli's finishing up his, and we're going to do a Q&A with him after his. But jump over to room 1, and we're going to definitely go through some golden nuggets for the day. I'll let you wrap up the rest.
All right, sounds great. Thanks again, Scott, and we'll see everyone again.
All right, thanks much. See ya.
Bye.
Do I end? Yeah, I got to end it.